Hi guys, welcome to Designing Characters for Live Action. I am Phillip Boutte. I'll be your moderator today. I'm a concept artist. I've been a concept artist for about 15, 16 years. Thank you very much. You guys look like a good crowd. I want to make sure that you guys, hear who's here. So I want them to introduce themselves. And you're going to introduce themselves, tell you a couple of projects that they've worked on. So let's start with Christian.
Hey, Christian Alzmann. I'm a concept design supervisor at film currently. And the last few projects are like Mandalorian, all things Star Wars, the seats as well.
Baby Yoda.
Hi, I'm Crash McCreery. I worked on a TV movie called Creature that nobody saw. And
Crash, please don't.
I'm a character designer. Worked on Jurassic Park and Pirates of the Caribbean, Rango.
Edward Scissorhands.
Come on, Scissorhands.
What up? I'm Karla. I've worked with HBO, Marvel Studios, ILM, Warner Brothers, Wizards of the Coast, your mom. I don't know.
I don't think any of us could get away saying that. Like, okay.
Hey, she's quite nice. She's very lovely. No. My mom's good. Anyway, I'm mostly notably known for my design of Doctor Strange, the first one. And thanks, Crash. And I don't know. Go for it.
My name is Neville Page. Sorry. That's your applause. Neville Page, concept designer in entertainment, worked on Avatar and Piranha and a bunch of stuff in between. There's a range.
I'm Wes Burt. I work in Marvel Studios right now, and I've worked for Paramount and a bunch of other film stuff, a lot of video game work, all kind of character design. The Avengers films, Loki, a lot of stuff coming out soon, and also the Dungeons and Dragons movie coming out next year, stuff like that.
I'm Rob Bliss. I'm from England.
Woo! Yes.
Enough said.
All right. I did a lot of the Harry Potter films. Worked on Dark Knight. What else did I do? Done a little bit of Marvel.
How do you spell your name?
If somebody could Google me, please. Tell me what I've done. Yeah. But those are probably the main things. Oh, I did a bit of Guardians of the Galaxy for the latest one, so yeah. Oh, Godzilla? Did Godzilla. I invented Godzilla.
As Rob has illustrated, once you start working for a long period of time, you just don't know. You really just continue to do the work and have a good time with it. So the first thing that I want to say is that because of our careers, right, I want to talk about our careers at large, because I think that I could ask these guys boring questions about, like, how did you start? Who inspires you? I think I want to talk about the actual job and what our day-to-day is, and give you guys some insight into what that means and what it entails, right? So everyone here does design for live action, and across the board, they do designs for everything, right? I want to talk about some of the, I guess, the pipeline, like, of kind of how you guys start your creative process within designing characters, and talk about a little bit of your, like, day-to-day process, just to get people familiar with how we work, like the hours, the time, the dedication. So I think I'll start it with Karla.
Oh, man. Oh, Jesus. No pressure. Let's lead this. Thanks, Phil.
You're welcome.
So, a day in life, I think, would be a good way to start. I used to work in studios, and when it was in studios, you have to be there a specific time. You usually have, like, your daily meetings, your daily stand-ups. And then you mostly get, like, the blurb or, like, a little description of what it is that you're supposed to design. At that stage, I kind of like to put on, like, a detective hat and just be like, okay, well, what are the questions? Like, what does the person look like? What is the story? You try to get as much details as you can to kind of help inspire something, a design. then you get to, kind of focus in. I've been working from home now for like 8 years now. I think ILM was, thank you. I think ILM, I'm happy about it. No. I do miss working with teams. Like, I do miss working, with people like, Christian. If I'd work at Marvel, I'd get to hang out with Wes. And it is, there's a kind of energy, a fantastic energy that happens when you work in a team. But I like my own kind of solitude, and I like to just get into the work. I think a lot of it, for people who are wanting to get into it, I think, being resilient with yourself, just allowing yourself to have good days and bad days, but still kind of, you rely on, technique to help you get through the bad days is really important. Staying curious and just be, and excited about what you do helps. Personally as well, doing personal work helps me a lot, because we solve a lot of visual problems for other people. And that can be very rewarding, but sometimes we also need to, help ourselves, But I don't want to take too much of the floor, but just a... Yeah. I can keep going.
It's over.
I can keep going. Yeah. I've done monologues before. I've taken acting
Started with a day in the life of, and that's when I just turned off.
Yeah. He's new. Rob he's from England.
Sounds like you're next.
You're next.
Am I next?
Yeah.
Turns out.
What was the question again? What was it? We've got to outline how we start our day. All right, here we go. So I live out in the countryside in England. I moved out of London, did similar thing maybe to you, getting away from working in the studios and stuff. And so my day currently starts at waking up in the dark at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, that's so early.
Yeah. And I have to get up at 6 in the morning in order to get ready by 8. So I make a big bowl of porridge with blueberries and bananas, bit of honey, coffee and tea, and that takes a couple of hours. Have a shower. Yeah.
It's the oatmeal.
I'm just warming up now. And then, so 8 o'clock I have to get up to work in a room at the top of the house in order to be able to walk the dogs at 11. And I have to do that for 2 hours to give my girlfriend time to paint away from the dogs we've got. Because we got a new dog recently and he hasn't got an off switch. And then around about 1 o'clock I come back. Hopefully my girlfriend's made me something to eat, because that's the deal for me, walking the dogs for 2 hours. And then I struggle on for the rest of the day till 7. Then I stop. I leave my room, realise how fucking cold it is in the house. And that's annoying. Then I go downstairs and I light a fire and then sit with the dogs and watch Netflix.
That's probably the best and most real answer you'll ever get
Yeah.
from an artist from that question.
He never spoke of getting dressed once, so I had a very, very specific image of the whole thing.
No, that is a rule. If you work at home, you've got to get dressed.
Oh,
Yeah.
it is. It's true.
No, you have to for your mental health. Yeah.
I'll try it.
Here's the thing. One of the things that I like about his answer is that it's a real answer, which is it's not always about drawing. Sometimes it's about doing other things, right? So I think that that's one of the things that, like, that was an actual real answer, and I really appreciate it. I think one thing that I'll switch to, just in case anybody else has any other question about this, is that I think that one of the things you need to know about each artist up here, they're all incredible draftsmen. They all have very strong foundational skills, artistic skills, that they've built on over time to acquire new things or to put things into their pipeline. Can you guys talk about, like, just foundational training? Because I think it's one of those things that I feel like now, with all the technology and everything that's coming out, I think that sometimes it's easy to miss, or it's easy to try to mask your design by using technology. But I find that the one thing that I always go back to are artists that can actually draw and paint. And I think each one of you has that style down. So please give me some examples, or just talk about how you feel about that.
Crash. Neville. Oh no. I said Crash because what I do and what I aspired, I shouldn't say what I do, what I aspired to do, and you've heard me say this before, so it's the same old lie, is that he has inspired me with what his technique. That's what I was drawn to. The Jurassic Park books, opened those up, saw that these were pencil drawings, and thought, I have yet to learn how to draw. So your draftsmanship has always been and still is a motivation. I look back at those drawings and think, God damn it, I'm still not there.
Appreciate that.
It's true. Oh, it is 100% true, and it's 110% true to me.
How about you?
Yeah.
Think of me. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm probably the worst person to ask because I could draw when I was small. I was small at one point, and I did go to arts center, but there was only one class that taught me something. Really, I was a horrible student, and I just did what I wanted to do, and it was a head drawing class, and it taught me about light and shape, and I think that foundation about how to see things is probably the biggest help for me in my career, because you can then invent, as soon as you understand the laws of nature and light and dark and shadow, you can draw anything and make it and put it in a real situation. It's like, sure, it's great to have line and gesture and render and all of that, but really understanding form and how light plays on that form, I think was probably the biggest value that I have.
Foundation.
Like when I started, it was long enough that when I started, we were kind of a traditional art department. It was pen, it was pencil. I had to learn how to use markers because I went to art center as well, and we didn't learn that in the illustration track. And then soon after, Photoshop came in, and then 3D started coming in a few years later, and I just picked those up along the way. But I definitely notice when I'm looking at art, I can always tell when people don't have painting or drawing skills. There's a coldness to 3D. 3D's great. I use it so much now, but there's just a coldness that if you have that drawing and painting foundation, that you can overcome it and breathe life into it and make it actually look like art instead of just a render.
There's something when an artist has a foundational skill or an understanding of something. Drawing is understanding, right? You're drawing and you're kind of communicating that visually. I want to speak to that about Wes, actually.
Yeah, I was about to say, because a lot of people compare it to like working out with a muscle, but I don't really find it that way. I find it's more like a language.
Yes.
And as you learn it, you become more and more fluent. And when you recognize other drawing, you recognize that they're also fluent in a certain language, and you can also glean different things from that.
It's good to push it back to Wes too, because when I look at Wes's drawings, one of the things that I'm always really blown away by is his understanding of form and shape and function. And I think that that's something that when you're looking at that, there's something visceral about it. Like when you look at an artist that understands things, it's the difference between having a general form like a hand, right? And then someone that really understands what's going on with that hand. I think that that's a difference in your artwork, that if you can study those foundational skills and spit them back out, it just changes your work.
Can I respond to this?
Please.
When you think of the military and polishing your shoes, for example, I mean, that's a useless skill because you're going to go out and get them dirty. But there's a reason that they do it, and it is because you hone a certain perception, and it's an attitude towards what you do. And drawing, the point of drawing historically was it's the language, and it's the way to articulate an intention. And digital is the same, but the biggest difference is one is intimate and one is less intimate. So when you draw, you can observe the world and take a photograph. No offense to photographers. But we as designers can observe the world and pick up a book, do some research and go, oh, okay, that's an animal of interest. I get it. You don't until you really look at it and try and understand it. So that observation and willingness to invest the time and energy to cognitively understand what's happening is key. But take it a step further, read about it, understand what it is, why it is, where it came from, how it works, etc., the biology, the physics, and then take that a step further and draw it. And when you draw it, it is an intimate experience because every single element of it now is channeled through you, whether it be muscle memory or the articulation or just the mental attachment and intimacy with shape, silhouette, form, etc. I can't think of anything more connective than the intimate experience through observation of drawing it. So even if you're 100% digital, a pencil, something with grit, something with texture, all those things, it just affects the senses to make that experience so profound that it is now part of you. And I don't mean that in a, well, I guess in a spiritual sense, but in a memory sense, in your personal library, it's there now, and you can then tap into it later.
I wanted to actually pull that back to Rob, actually, because so one of the things that I love, I've been a fan of Rob's work forever, right? It's one of the things that I love about it is that although he's drawing and he's technically skilled, I can tell that there's a thought process behind the things. It's not just making marks for no reason. The work that you did for Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Harry Potter's on the page, so we have the book, we can read it, right? But then visually, when you're trying to develop those things, like the Death Eater mask and all the things that you drew,
Yeah.
what were you looking at research-wise to kind of push that out? Like, what did you study,
Okay.
or what were you looking at?
I was doing some portfolio things yesterday. It was one of the things that I sort of said to a couple of the people to do with their design was that I was wondering if growing up in England, you're more likely to come across a castle and some armor and an exhibition in that castle. You know, you're closer to to history that's beyond 200 years old or whatever, you know. And so you naturally absorb it. Do you know what I mean? And also when you go out with your parents at the weekend and maybe they take you to exhibitions and stuff like that. And I mean, that's presumptuous of me to think that Americans don't see history as much as English people, but it's a smaller country. It's a smaller country with a greater density of armor and castles in it and stuff. So that sort of just rubs off on you. So the production designer, Stuart Craig, for instance, was like fully immersed in all that, and he was very much into creating that world and make it so everything was based on something that was very real to start off with. And that was important to him. But I think we naturally, as concept artists, we're thinking along those lines anyway. It's just like it's to do with world creation. You want to create a world. And also I think that sometimes people can overdo design. So I always try to do what's the simplest version I can do of this. So the Death Eater is a very, very simple design. And it's also looks like a lot of other things as well. And I always compare it to trying to find the last space in a car park. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's a final space that you can park that design that's the same as everybody else has done, but you can do one little thing that makes it different to everything else. You don't have to go over the top and putting bells and whistles on it to make it different. But I think fundamentally there's, having forgotten the question in the first place. What was the question? What was my thought process? Okay, listen, to make it sort of, to boil it down, you're trying to work out how can you make this real for the people that are looking at it. So if you look at a Ridley Scott film, it's always really enjoyable for the world you get immersed in. And the production design's very, very sort of... And if you do suddenly get something like in Gladiator, there's I think the final mask helmet thing he puts on, and to me it just... To me, that's the only thing that seems anachronistic design-wise in that. But the rest of it's completely... It throws me out of that world. So the rest of it is to do with immersing you in that world. So the thought process is, how can I make this real even though it's completely fantasy, you know? And for me, that's let's keep it simple and let's try and put some form of history into this, you know. Does that make sense?
Complete sense. The history of it is something that you guys have to latch onto. I think I talk to a lot of young artists, and like when you feel like you're floating or you feel like you don't know what's going on, it's probably because you stopped learning, right? Or you stopped giving yourself something to conceptually grasp onto. So research is really important because it's feeding how you think about what you're drawing. It's helping you to kind of find that design language that Rob was talking about and finding the simplest version, but it doesn't just come out of nowhere, right? It's not something where you just kind of sit and you're feeling lost or you're just trying to come up with something cool. There is a place for that, but I think that in order to tone it down to the story and to make it make sense, there's an inherent part of you where you're pulling from culture, right? Pulling from experience or pulling from things that you know and get excited about. And then there's also the research side of it, of trying to kind of visually, communicate the language of it by doing research and then finding a way to like link it back to the story. Can you guys talk about research, or just talk about like how you go about research? Because I feel like one of the things that ends up happening is everyone asks me this question, and when I tell them I go to the library, they freak out. They're like, "What? What's that? The library?" Like, it's the craziest thing. Any kind of research that you guys do besides, just obviously Google, or how you Google, if you do Google.
Well, I've got the answer. Well, let me see what it is. It's similar to what I was just saying a moment ago about the intimacy of something, because research is of no value unless you make it a part of your personal library, because the accumulation of the tools that you get, that you acquire, is that amalgamation of skill sets is only of value if you can draw upon them without having to open up a thing. So when you do research, I've got a ton of books. It's my favorite thing to acquire. That and bones, literally, is I've got a ton of various animal bones in my possession. And again, having it is of no value unless you know what the bone is, why it is the shape that it is, where the muscles attach, what it does in terms of articulation. Because then it's just a bone. And if you like it for shape's sake, that's okay too. So when you go about research, there's the process of where do you go? First of all, you want to differentiate yourself as an artist. You want to stand out. So going to the library is one way, because most of us, including myself, Google. It's convenient, it's there. So if you're going to go the Google route, what I think one has to do is understand you're asking questions. And I've used this in presentations before, and it's much like if you imagine going way back in time and you observe a bird and you say to yourself, I want to fly. So therefore, I'm going to use wax and put some feathers on my body and jump off a cliff. And if you know anything about, is it not Scylla and Charybdis, but Icarus, the Greek fable, flew too close to the sun and the wax melted, fell, and dropped dead. So that was the wrong question to ask, is I want to fly like a bird. And you assumed that research got you to putting feathers on your arms. But if you research how can I become aloft in the sky like a bird, that choice of questioning takes you down a different path altogether, and you have a balloon, a much more robust, capable form of flight at the time. So the same when you're Googling something, think about it in the same way that you want to design stuff, which is lateral thinking. The question I'm going to ask, which is an obvious question, is going to deliver the same results as everyone else asking that question. So if you ask a question differently, and that's what we do as designers, is we're always asking questions. And I can ask a few obvious ones, like the QWERTY keyboard. Where did that come from? And why does it exist? And most people may not know, but it was designed specifically out of the fact that the typewriter, when it was built, the human being was so fast at typing that the anvils of the alphabet were constantly locking up. So the company that first developed the typewriter decided to jumble the letters to make it harder to type, to slow the human interface down. And as a consequence, it made their mechanism usable. So here we are today. We've come so far down time that we have the exact old keyboard that can match human speed, but it's the old QWERTY, and it cannot change because that's what we're used to. And it's just an interesting thing about we're stuck with stuff because we don't ask the questions and we just accept it. Not much we can do about the keyboard, but point being, ask unique questions, whether it be through Google or what book you look for at the library. And I think that's the edge that we all strive for.
How many of you guys knew that fact about the typewriter?
Oh, wow.
It's neat.
I have one little comment to add. I always feel like what we do is like 70% reference and research,
Yeah.
and then 30% finding your 8-year-old child and what excites you, because you need to get that out and onto the work so that the work becomes exciting. Otherwise, it's just research. So we got the 70 and the 30, and then all your technique weaves that together to make the thing. So
Nice.
I think at this point, a lot of the artists do this naturally on this panel, but I think one of the things is I think about it like Inception. So like if I like the Matrix, I'm not going to copy the Matrix. I'm going to look at what they looked at to make the Matrix, and I'm just going to keep going underneath it until I find the base of the information,
Source.
right? So it's kind of like one of those, you're trying to find the source. So if you're searching in Google, you don't just stop at like general search. Like I could search Victorian puff sleeve, but then eventually I want to get to leg of mutton sleeve because that's what it's called. And then that gives me a much greater result than if I just type in like whatever I can think of and I don't know what it is, right?
Can I think? Oh.
and then,
No,
you've
no,
learned, and then you've learned something.
You learn something. Yeah.
Can I actually jump in here? Because I want to relay like a very similar experience. When I was working for the Nevers, that was exactly it. I had ordered a bunch of books on Victorian era back in like around 1890s England and a little bit earlier as well, just to kind of read the history of it. And like fun facts, like if you weren't rich enough to like own different layers of clothing with different, great materials, what people would do is stuff their body off of like newspaper. And yeah, like in order to maintain warm. And that ended up in one of the concepts of one of like certain characters where it's like, oh, like they are disheveled, they're horrible. And you could see little bits of newspaper around. Another thing, for example, is like the use of corset. Like the pending, back in Victorian era, it would seem only like prostitutes and people of like ill mental problems and stuff like that wouldn't wear their corset properly. Like that was seen as horrible. So our, more deranged character, Malady, actually one of the features is that she doesn't have her corset properly on because that is a cultural signifier that something's off with her. And it's like you kind of just jump into these like fun little rabbit holes, trying to see what's it. It's all about learning. It's super fun.
Do you hear the excitement? The excitement comes from, I think a lot of the times when we leave these projects, I'm not excited. If I get out of a project and I don't feel like I learned something like that, then I feel like I kind of failed.
Yeah.
Right? Like there should be something that you're taking away. If you're doing some episodic Chinese thing, you should take away from that the culture and understand what it is. If you're just kind of phoning it in, that's not conceptual. And I mean, you hear these people talk, a lot of the times when you hear them talk, there's this knowledge that just spews out because they just have to learn it. And I think that the better drawings come from the fact that you're learning and you know this thing and you've acquired information than not. Like, I don't know if Crash could draw dinosaurs as well as he does if he didn't understand and know what they were like, right? To a degree.
Yeah.
Are you that old?
I'm that old. I have a photograph here.
He drew from life.
Drawing from life.
Well, it's funny because if you look at the first couple of designs I did for Jurassic, they're horrible. Like the anatomy is just atrocious, but the attitude was there, and so that's what kind of grabbed Steven's attention and everyone else's, and it wasn't until we really got into really designing the dinosaurs out to study skeletal structure, what's all the new kind of theories about them, and so they approved, and then as soon as the sculptors got involved, they added their $10,000, and it kind of grew from there. So research is really important, but those initial drawings were just like Chrissy just said, the 8-year-old going, I want to see this. And that's what started this.
Speaking of 8-year-olds, I want to talk to Christian about designing one of the most endearing characters. I had to try and get that through. Yeah. One of the cutest endearing characters that we've seen in a really long time, which is Baby Grogu or Baby Yoda. Can you talk about the design process for that?
Originally, I was just saying this in my demo today, so sorry if some of you guys saw that, but whenever a new director comes to work on a Star Wars feature, I've noticed everybody has their own version, what they think Star Wars is. So I thought Jon Favreau, I was like, okay, I worked with him on another project. He likes realism. I'll go for like a toddler, a little more human proportioned toddler. Still trying to make it cute. And then the note I got back was, no, he wants like an ugly little puppet from 1983. And you know, and so I'm sitting there going like, okay, I'm a master of early 80s films. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm putting on my Jim Henson and my Dark Crystal, and you know, what he's really saying is he wants like a Frank Oz style puppet that could go right next to the original Yoda. And I'm like, okay, so I think I know what he wants. He wants it really cute, lots of wrinkles. So where I'm able to pull my personal experience out, I love American illustrators. Even though this guy's a German, moved to America, I thought, oh, the best babies ever put on canvas were J.C. Leindecker's babies.
Oh, yes.
And so I was thinking about the massive cheeks and how they hang out and the really diminutive chin and how the upper lip sweeps out. And I'm like, okay, if I just put that in there with you know, big eyes and big ears painted green, you know, but I mean, in essence, that was kind of the thing. But really what J.C. Leindecker's doing is he's distilling and simplifying what the cutest thing of babies are, and I keyed off that. And once I did that, that the 8-year-old in me was chuckling while doing it, and I was like, oh, I think I got this. You know, it was worked out.
Talked about technique and actual history, but I want to kind of put the spotlight on Neville really quickly, because Neville was very much so on the forefront of 3D technology. I remember like right when it was kind of starting, he was like all about it. So I want you to kind of talk about that process and how it's grown and changed and evolved for you in the pipeline of your work.
That's a long conversation we could all have. ZBrush was a thing that changed it all, of course. But prior to ZBrush, I was working in SolidWorks. My background is industrial design as a product and automotive designer. So it made sense that I would gravitate towards more technical software. And I learned SolidWorks, and it was painful, but very powerful at the same time. Painful because I wasn't able to do what I wanted to do with it in terms of shape. I was certainly able to do things with it technically, but cool shapes were back then very, very hard. And then years later, ZBrush came out, and a ex-student intern at the time, Joe Hura, said to me, hey, have you seen the ZBrush thing? And we both looked at it on my computer. And it was if you remember back then, the demo was an anglerfish. And it was a sped up sculpting demonstration of this anglerfish, started with a sphere. And I was like, oh my God. Now, I was in the toy industry pretty heavy at this point, doing WWF figures. I've sculpted The Rock more times than I care to share. I know him better than he knows himself. And you know, every year it's like, more fucking clay. Just stop already. He's big enough. But I realized that, man, if you can combine, I'll go back one more step. In college, in 1990, I graduated from Art Center, College of Design in Pasadena. And my teacher, Ted Youngkin, was talking about how he's involved with this amazing technology, you know, Ted, 3D printing. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? And he described it. You can build a whole car door, wind up the window, close it, and all the mechanisms printed at once. I was like, what? So, cut to, I'm friends with Gentle Giant, who is a company that has done a lot of figures and a lot of 3D printing. And I got this idea of, hey, can we scan one of our WWF guys and see how well that prints out? And we printed it out. And then we thought, the digital technology of having this head printed out, that's very good. But now combining that with ZBrush to where we can now sculpt and clean up the scan in the computer, and more importantly, because I've been through it a million times, can you make it just 10% smaller or 10% bigger? That constant request. It's like, yeah, 10% is a whole new sculpture. 1% a whole new sculpture. So knowing that you could do it in a computer, I was like, technically this seems like the greatest thing. But I'm then at SIGGRAPH and they're demonstrating in Photoshop and ZBrush. They have a computer screen up here and they have a tablet down here and they've got a stick connected to an arm. It's kind of like this whole thing and a coiled wire connecting it to the computer. And they're saying, yes, you can sculpt and draw like this. I thought, there's just no way that the human brain is going to detach from here and look at there and have the mouse move around with any kind of precision. And here we are today. I was completely wrong. And that was profound for me to be so completely wrong that I really look back on that when I have an opinion about something new. AI won't go there, but I have an opinion about it, but I'm gonna wait.
You killed Karla.
But if this was back in the the 14th century, and I was to say, oh, typesetting, thing of the past, because we've just come up with the QWERTY keypad. But the technology, what it does for me today is, and I think the suit that I did for the Klingon torchbearer for Star Trek Discovery was where I was able to prove something to myself, and that was they wanted a specific thing. There was very little time and very little money, and the only way to do it was in ZBrush and print it out and wear it. And there was no time at all to do anything other than have it be correct. There wasn't like a fitting, let's go back and rework it. And there was also no time for them to judge the design. We had a sketch, it was a basic idea, and because the time was so compressed and they were in such peril schedule-wise, it literally went like this, and I don't want to steal the floor as well because you took most of the time.
Keep going.
So then I said to them, the only way that this suit can be completed in time is if I show you from the ground up daily what is completed. So I sent the shoe, and I said, here's the shoe. Trust me, the rest is going to look amazing. And then a couple days later, here's the shin. A couple days later, here's the knee, thigh. Worked my way up. They didn't know what it looked like until we put it on the actor as a 3D printed output suit of armor for the first fitting. And I didn't know it was going to work completely. We assumed and hoped that it would. But 3D technology allowed us to do something that was just not doable. Yes, it could have been carved out of jade back in the day. The skill set sort of does exist, but there isn't the budget and the time today. So digital technology allows it, but it does not at all take away all the previous questions of foundation, great sense of how to research, history, understanding culture and religion, and all the real important things in life, and using that to then sprinkle onto your art.
I want to say, I think, as moving forward with what Neville just said too, I want to say that these concept artists, especially in our jobs, we're able to kind of influence things based from the very first level, right? So it's like the first stab at what this thing looks like from page to camera or whatever. Do you guys have any moments in your career where there was something maybe, because we're given briefs, right? So it's like, we need a Klingon suit of armor, or we need this. Do you have any moments in your career to where there was something given to you, or where you did something completely opposite or off the wall and it ended up being the thing as opposed to what you were given?
You look like rebels.
Hang on, I can't. I can't think of something. So I'm trying to work out a way to actually get into the question.
I think, well, let's start. Karla, talk about Doctor Strange, about how, the casting of Doctor Strange.
Oh, so that was fun. So Doctor Strange was my first project with Marvel, and I'd just come, from ILM, and I was really, really, really excited. We still didn't quite have a cast. We were talking, I think, with Joaquin Phoenix at the time, and we didn't really even have a strong visual direction just yet. We were just like, oh, try maybe a suit, try maybe. And so they came up to me, they're like, okay, Karla, please do some Doctor Strange with actors you think would work out. But try to not make it look too much like them, just in case they don't like it. You know, kind of hint at it gently. And so I submitted Pedro Pascal and Benedict Cumberbatch because I thought, you know, I think those two would be fantastic. 2 weeks pass, and I get the call from Ryan. It's like, oh, it's going to be Benedict Cumberbatch. And I was just like, did I just summon the Cumberbatch? Yeah. Yeah. And it was really, really fun. Kind of awkward going to the premiere and seeing him face to face though, because you paint these people for so long, and it's not enjoyable. You feel like a creeper. You do. You're just like, ugh. You're just like, oh, sorry, I don't mean to do this. But no, it was really fun. But that happens sometimes. Like sometimes you don't get full casting. Sometimes you even suggest. I know Wesley likes to suggest a lot, and Marvel will be like, yo, you should hire this one. I'm just opening it for you, man.
That's with Marvel. That's like a tough one because you just end up having to paint over it later if it's not the actor.
Yeah,
so you're creating more work for yourself later if it's not the person cast. So
Yeah, that does suck.
but,
I have a story that wasn't me. It was a friend I work with, and it was a show that Crash famously did the design on for Pirates of the Caribbean. We were working out. My friend Aaron was the designer that took Crash's artwork and kind of had to make it photo real. He took credit for it, but
Ireland has its PR machine, right?
And so the note from Gore Verbinski was, I don't want it. It's supposed to be mummified, and I want to see meat on there. I don't want it to look like beef jerky. And that was like a note. It was like beef jerky. So Aaron went to Trader Joe's and bought turkey jerky, and the rest is history. Because like everything he was asking for was it's dried desiccated muscle, but not beef jerky, and it's
Turkey.
like turkey jerky. Yeah, healthier. Yeah.
On the turkey jerky note, I want to open it up to the audience. Do any of you guys have questions for the panel?
Neville, you spoke about thinking laterally. Sometimes I find it difficult when dealing with tasks to work a little too much within the parameters. Can you just like elaborate more like about thinking laterally? Like, are you conscious of that when you're dealing with a brief? Like, how do you, how do you work within the constructs of the problem, but expand further upon it without going too far out of bounds? Does everyone hear that question? How do you stay within the parameters of the task at hand, but go lateral and do something different than was asked, really, I think, right? Does that sum it up okay? The first thing we all have to remember is you've been employed to do something, to realize somebody's vision. That's absolutely paramount. And what helps anyone who has other visions is to just remember that this isn't yours. This is somebody else's that you're trying to assist them realize. And that makes the job easier sometimes when you just go, it's a job and it's a great job and it's a privilege, usually always. But at the same time, especially if you feel like the direction you've been given can be more, there's the potential arrogance of coming in with, I know you didn't ask for this, but check this out. There's two simple answers to that. The first thing is make sure you answer their question first. And the second is if you have an idea and you have the time, and it's usually on your own dime, at least initially, and when they take a bite, then that's a different story. But when you bring in your own vision, you have to be able to back it up, dare I say, with intelligence, as opposed with objectivity versus subjectivity. And usually objectivity is coupled with intelligence. So as an example, you bring something in and you think it's cooler looking because you're working as an aesthetician specifically, that is easily shot down. Why are you bringing this in? Because it's really cool looking. Why is it cool looking? Because I don't think it's cool looking. Sell it to me. It's cool looking because it's cool looking. I don't know. and you won't be able to, your efforts in lateral thinking are for naught. But if you come in and you're able to qualify it and justify it in a way that sells it intellectually, they can still say, I'm not interested, but Jesus, I get where you're coming from. And that is a very powerful tool. And I know it happened to me specifically on Avatar with James Cameron when he asked for something. I thought, well, I better deliver that. But I have an idea that I think could be pretty cool, which is just a combination of different biological functions to get the banshee to open its mouth real wide and do certain things. So my design alternate, and if you know James Cameron, he's very specific about what he wants. Draw me a black cube. If you come in with a white sphere, he's not going to be happy. But if you come in with a white sphere and a good rationale, and a black one, and so I came in with the opposite of what he was asking for. And I got a WTF reaction initially, and then I explained the mechanics of it. And it was undeniably qualified. I won't say it was a great idea, but I was able to say, this is how it works, and this is how it could benefit you, Jim, in your film. And it was that's what we're doing. So just if you come in with something else, just make sure you've got a good reason, because even if you say the caveat, this was on the weekend, this was in the evenings, my dime, my time, it'll still be perceived as you wasted the production's time, because the perception is they own us 24/7 once you sign up. And by the way, back to an earlier question, I'll say one thing about time in like how do you spend your day. I'm 9 to 5 now. I have a child, a 4-year-old, and it's vital that he gets the time. When I've done extra work, and I've worked this 24/7, I've done it most of my life, usually it doesn't make a difference. So just remember that the most important person to service is yourself and the people that you are taking care of. So don't get lost in the gig. 9 to 5 is all that they're paying you for. It might be union, and therefore it's a 12-hour day, which I personally think is ridiculous. 9 to 5 is all you get, but I give all, and I'm much more productive when I make that my personal rule. I just wanted to put that out there. I'm done.
That's very good. That's very good.
It's a serious question, don't worry. When a lot of younger people, the question that they ask me is about character versus environment. And at one point, should you know, or was it obvious to you guys? You were like, I'm a character designer, not an environment designer. Was it clear? Was it assigned to you? Did you choose it? Because I feel like a lot of people these days are encouraged to do everything. And it's very stressful because to focus just on characters, is that still a niche thing to do now? Or is it still valid to say, I only want to do creatures and people? Can you still get away with that, is my question.
For someone who kind of does everything, I would say do what floats your boat.
Yeah.
If something doesn't float your boat, it'll show up and you won't get a lot of work. No, Hollywood never tells you when there's a problem. You just don't get called or emailed. You know?
That's true.
Yeah.
But there are some in Hollywood that will tell you graphically.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Just saying.
But yeah, so like, and you might start off as a character guy, and you love that out of school, and then you get tired of it, and you're like, oh, I actually really like spaceships or hardware, and think of it as it's all steps on hopefully a 20 or 30-year journey.
Be flexible.
Yeah, well, and most important, do what you're into, because that will be the best work.
Yeah.
Can I jump in on that really quick? Actually, I started straight up just character. Because it was kind of like what I was into, and it was what I, knew the best. And it's, you're at a job, so you want to give them your best. You don't have time to explore, or not explore, but you don't have time to learn. But what I found out is I started to incorporate more environments into my work, and that kind of opened up more possibilities for myself. So I was able to do now keyframes, keyframe illustrations, and do now like really wonderful, story scenes with like lush environments. And now I'm addicted to that. So yeah, definitely be flexible. What's up?
Marvel forced me to do it. And I was like, I like it.
Yeah, what's up? It's cool. It's cool. Be open. It's all shapes.
I just want to say everyone here is so cracked and talented, and I really love everyone. I'm not picking favorites. I'm just going to ask a question to Christian. Don't take it personally. I want to ask everyone a question. But so you were talking about the little 8-year-old child you keep inside of your brain, which is yourself, not someone else. And you want to translate that to someone else. And sometimes I fall into a trap where like sometimes you yourself think something is cool and someone else may think it's cool, but maybe not as cool as what you think, or maybe not even like completely in their genre. Because like, what if you like sci-fi and they don't like sci-fi, but like you're trying to convince them that this would work more than something else? How do you go into their head to try to convince them with like what Neville said, to get them to understand that with some of your concepts?
I mean, for me, I don't. I never. I rarely, if ever, have a chance to talk to someone else is usually showing my art to the client, and if it doesn't work for them, I don't get the design. That's life. All you can do is provide your point of view, and hopefully it's an excited point of view on it. And mine is fueled from 80s movies. And all the books, like the science fiction, fantasy books I love to read, and all the illustrators that I love, whatever gets you excited is the right way to go for you. And if it doesn't work, I've had tons of directors that just never approved anything I put in front of them. I mean, and it's just how I can't change, Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. You try. It's fun. It's definitely. Sometimes you're close, and so you try and figure out what they like and what they're into, and you can steer things. But if you're really far, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah. You know what Ian always says? Ian McKegg? He has a really good take on this. It's almost like casting. Like, movies cast certain actors or actresses because they do really great roles. That doesn't mean that other actors suck. It just means that they work well for that role. And that's sometimes the same thing with our job.
That actually reminds me of a tip. When I do have a chance to talk to a director and we're doing a creature, I usually think of a creature or a character as a character. Like, otherwise I get bored. I don't want to just do like cows and stuff, like, which I've done plenty in Star Wars, but I'm always trying to give him attitude, like, oh, this is grumpy cow,
You've got an edge to you, don't you?
But like one of the things I like to ask is like, okay, if you could cast any actor from film history, any character from a movie, who would this character be? And that's like, you want to talk the language of film to film people. If you talk illustrator language, they don't know what that is. So if you're like, is this James Cagney gangster alien? And like that thing, then all of a sudden I've got 10 ideas I can, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's always story first, no matter what it is. It's story first, and ideally you've read it or you at least get enough information, and then from there, sometimes I just start with tone. I'll start my design just based on tone and feel. And if I can get that ball rolling with the people making decisions, then the designs will fall into place more easily. But story first, a tone.
And the designs are important because that's what its intent is to do, is to tell the story through that image. Because they've been talking about it forever, and they're sick of talking about it, so they want to see it. So it's true. It's really important to have that communication in the image to speak for itself. And if you're lucky enough to have a relationship with a director where you do talk and you start a dialogue, that's the best. But and which is the way I kind of deal with most of my work. I've been lucky to just kind of personally talk to directors and not through
And that is rare. That it's usually through the production designer.
Yeah.
Right.
Hi. I wanted to ask you, the panel, if you guys had any tips or routines that you guys had before pitching some of your character designs. In this day of computers and Zoom and not being present when some of the younger people are presented, to a panel. What do you guys want to suggest, or do you guys have any tips or tricks?
Alcohol.
That's all right. Yeah, it depends on the time of day. I would say I'll try not to consume this, but know your audience, because every receiver is going to be different. Some directors are like, give it to me now, I don't have time. And always assume that they don't have time, because that's almost always the case. And attention spans are difficult to capture, or at least sustain. So knowing, when I've pitched to via Zoom, which is still I feel the worst way to pitch, because it's hard to command your audience, because as you're pitching, you can kind of see this thing happening. And it's like, oh, you're not really listening. So you got to figure out a way to grab them. So in terms of technically, how do you pull them in? That's a much bigger conversation, but just know who it is you're talking to, so at least you can align your presentation to being keynote. Be organized. Don't just have files that are filled with stuff. I typically go keynote. So it is organized, and I have words that set me up, at least, for what I'm about to say. And it just keeps it moving clean and precise and efficient.
And hopefully the images do a lot of the talking.
Yeah.
No, that's why I have to talk them through. Mine suck. So I was like, I got lots of words.
I'm just saying, hopefully.
But that's important right there. Make sure that your image, what you're painting, tells very clearly, a story, but also clearly, what the materials are. Any kind of ambiguity makes that communication a little bit more difficult. And for some, especially when you don't get to see the director face to face, you don't get to advocate for your work. You just have to rely on the work itself. So the clearer it is, the better.
No hone in on anything that's not right.
Oh
Yeah.
And then it just becomes a whole dialogue about what's wrong,
But every film that you go on is different personalities and a different kind of hierarchy, a different culture depending on who's at the top of the pyramid or whatever. And years ago, we were sort of expected to, when we had a show and tell, you were expected to support what you were saying, support the work that you were presenting. And I definitely was somebody who wanted to persuade a director away from an idea that I didn't like. And also, sort of, I was always afraid of letting the pictures speak completely for themselves. So I'd always have to kind of talk so much that they can't think whilst we're in the meeting. Do you know what I mean? But that was a kind of a good little period of time where we were expected to do that. Now, let's say, so once I was expected to speak, and you suddenly realise at a certain point in your career you're expected to shut up. Do you know what I mean? I mean, there's been, you'll find that over time maybe your ability to talk to a director disappears because so many people are inserting themselves in. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so whilst the tectonic plates of film sort of jostle around, you suddenly find that you're far away from being able to talk about your work. And it used to be a real big concern for me. Nowadays, the way I work, if somebody asks me if I want to do a project for them, I'm like, yeah, but the way I work is I start Monday and then I send all the work off on a Friday. And we don't sort of just let me get on with it. So Friday night is fish and chips night, yeah? So around about 6 o'clock, I name everything, I get it uploaded, and I write the quickest fucking email I can think of that isn't rude, because it's so quick, do you know what I mean? Yeah. And then I go off, drive to go and get fish and chips, do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I used to really, really want that as part of what I did. I felt it was expected. Then you find that you drag some behaviours from one film into another film, and I've done that before, working for Stuart Craig. really nice guy, expects you to talk about the process and really enjoys talking about creativity. Then you go on to another film and you start talking and you're a little bold about your opinion and the director's looking at you like you're a massive cunt
Yeah.
and he wants you to shut up and fuck off.
Right.
And then over time you get institutionalized by that. And eventually you just don't say anything. But it's fine. You get used to it and you accept it. But I think as I don't know, I think I mean, I'm older now, but I think as young people, like what you were saying about working 9 to 5, I think as young people should put those extra hours in because I think physically and mentally they can deal with that. And they've got to get ahead of other people anyway. Do you know what I mean? I mean, your friends are the people you've got to beat. So you've all got to be working hard on each other. But at a certain time, you do have to accept, I'm not doing this like this anymore. You look back at all this dreadful work that you've done across these projects, and you just finally realise, I've got to work like this, otherwise I'm not giving them anything that's useful to them. And also you just accept the little bits that you don't, like the fact you don't communicate with anyone anymore. I mean, I'm sure you're fine about not ever talking to directors about, yeah.
I've been in contract position for most of my career, so I'm very far. I've only had like one time where I worked directly with a director, so to
Right.
me that's not the norm.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
It was the norm for us when we started.
Yeah.
You were absolutely expected to speak your mind, and also I think it was like in some ways I look back and I'm thinking, well, I was stupid to do that. But you felt like you were going to, like if the directors sometimes come up with ideas that you just think are appalling, and you feel like I've got to save them from that idea.
Yeah.
And then one day you realise they, do you know what I mean? Maybe you're not asked along to that meeting the next time.
But there's also something. Can I just say a quick story? When you're with a director that is like Gore Verbinski, who's really funny, and we were working on Pirates 3, I think, and we were considering Queen Latifah for Calypso, and so he goes, yeah, she's kind of crazy, and you know, maybe Queen Latifah. So I did this drawing of Queen Latifah, and I made her look really kind of weird, and it was a bad drawing, but I'd been killing it on the pirate stuff, so I was like, this is going to be great. And I came in and I show him, and he's like, I don't know, she's kind of like going, peekaboo. And I went, really? And I go, okay, well, what if I went, peekaboo? And I go, okay, Gore. So if I changed peekaboo, and it was just this, I respected him as a director so much, but he was really making fun of me the whole time. And you run that risk of like, you know, sometimes it would be nice to just run it through a production design. Kind of step back on the whole thing. But it was hilarious. Peekaboo. It was just like, fuck, all right already.
Sometimes you want to keep that professional relationship.
Right.
There's a definitive pipeline thing, what Rob was talking about is actually true, which is sometimes, I think even for myself, control-wise, I want to explain my idea because I don't want to give them any room to reinterpret it and put some dumb idea in there that I didn't mean, right? And then other times, I don't have access to where there's so many people in between me, I'm just wanting to do my job and then get home to my family and just disengage, right? Like I want to do my job, I'm having fun, but I kind of don't want to talk about it because I want to be able to like have it speak for itself. So there is a pipeline difference in there, and it really is dependent on the project. It's a hard question to answer just to say like as a general rule, you really just kind of have to fill it out because it does change. Or you do have some direct relationships where there's an ego. So then someone's just like, "Are you not doing what I'm saying, or do you not agree with me?" And then sometimes I'll be like, "No, I don't agree with you. This is a horrible idea." It just depends, right? But you just have to feel it out. I can take one last question.
Make it good.
This is it.
I have a question about like how do you keep on falling in love with the craft when you're working on sometimes maybe projects where you're disconnected from the whole thing and you're just doing exactly what you're told and it's not exactly the ideas that you thought were the best. Maybe you think they were appealing and you're like, oh no. And do you like either go and work on personal project at night so you can keep the fuel on the day, or is it?
I think you might be in the wrong business if they feel that way. I really do.
The old side gig.
Yeah, I love it because it's different every time, and it's always. And for me, the challenge isn't what I want to do. It's making them happy. I think you said before, someone's idea coming to you and you bringing that to life. To me, that's just what turns me on. And I have ideas, and it's true. You always give them what they ask for first, and sometimes it'll spur on some other ideas for yourself. But if you're not excited about doing that every time, then maybe you should be a writer. Maybe you should come up with your own stuff. Change your path a little bit, because that's such a huge part of the job.
I had a teacher at Art Center that he talked about this fictitious assignment as an illustrator. It's like, okay, this very high-end furniture company hires you as an illustrator to illustrate this table, right? And he's like, that's your job. He's like, your job is to make that table look like it's the best freaking table ever. You know what I mean? And if you're not into that, sometimes that is the job, and you always have to find a way to get excited about the table.
I think that there's always something to love in something.
Yeah.
It's like there are a lot of bad movies out there, but I think every one of them are watchable, because you can find something. It might be the editing, might be the score, whatever it is. And the same with work. I've had plenty of gigs, I'm sure you all have, where the subject matter or the person you're working with is just completely unsavory. So how do you find the love in it? Because you're stuck in it. You can quit and maybe find another job, but let's assume you cannot. Then I might just change it up for myself. They don't need it to be a watercolor. They don't need it to be marker. I really want to do some pencil work today, and I'm going to focus on my foundation skills I did back at Art Center and make every form read. And I'm going to enjoy, via articulating in a specific medium, that's my pleasure. Or I'm going to bust out. I wouldn't do oil paint because there is a time frame. But I think there's ways to find the love in something, and just it's almost like a metaphor for life. If you have that attitude towards the things you are presented with, life just becomes more pleasurable.
I would, yes, that was quite good. I would add on to that, because this is all amazing advice. Almost like renegotiate with yourself what success means. Because like we think that so much of the job will be like, yeah, cool, but we've all done our fair share of boxes, our fair share of grand tables. And again, it's like renegotiating what is successful in your mind and what is exciting, and to say, hey, like, you laugh, but I'm like, oh, I'm gonna make a sweet like presentation of a table with like beautiful glasses and people enjoying it, candlelit dinner, you get that nice like light, and to find something that excites you, as Neville was mentioning. So yeah, and everything has that. I've painted doors, I've painted boxes, anything that's mundane and boring, I've done it. But every time I would just get really excited, I'm like, I'm gonna paint a really cool door. I'm gonna paint a really cool box. I'm gonna get in that grain and like do some cool patterning. Someone like broke this box weirdly. They stepped on it. The splinters, like there's so much that you can find. So yeah.
The other thing that I will say is that for me, I think that because everybody solves it differently, I've solved it by being competitive. Like, I'm like, that's a horrible idea, but I'm going to make that horrible idea look great. I just look at it as a challenge, right? Because it's like, I know it's a bad idea and I know it probably won't work, but the challenge for me then is trying to figure out how to represent it in the way that they've asked, to where it looks cool still, even though I know that they'll probably look at it and be like, oh, that's a bad idea. And it's like, I know. Like, let's move on.
That's a winning philosophy.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's our time, guys. Thank you so much.